Time now. There we go. Ask the Podcast Coach for August 14th, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that fun-filled music that means it's Saturday. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over... Well,
sort of.
Yeah. Over there is is Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you, and happy guest in your studio appearance. We've got somebody. Why don't you take a second to introduce who you've got with us?
That's it. The one, the only. Don't be fooled by cheap imitations. It's funny. I started to type his name earlier, and I think I called him Greg.
Yeah, I was Greg earlier. I was
like,
how long have we known each other, Dave?
You know him as from the Horse Radio Network.com, the one and only Glenn Hebert, everybody.
Hey, everybody. It's good to be in the master studio.
Yeah.
This is fun.
It's always different, right? When you see it from the other side.
It's messier than I thought it would be, actually.
Did I actually type this right?
HorseRadioNetwork.com. Yes.
There we go.
Good.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I got a typo in there.
Trying to do it while he's saying it, which is never a great idea.
No.
Right? It's never a great idea to try and type and talk at the same time.
But we've been talking about Glenn going on the road, and he's officially now on the road. And of course, you can get tired maybe when you're on the road. And Jim, there's probably something that you do that will keep you awake on the road.
Yes, that's right. We coffee's always good. Glenn, we'll see if you're a coffee guy here in a little bit. But it's so good. Dave, who sponsors this coffee for?
Yeah, that is brought to you by our good friend Mark, who unfortunately we couldn't see at Podcast Movement because he's one of those polite Canadians, and he couldn't cross the border. But Mark over at podcastbranding.co, if you need something like a cool logo, like one of these, like Glenn has great branding. Or if you need a whole website, you need a PDF, there's another one. Look, and you've got these awesome things that I'll give you an example. I just got a new mic stand that we might talk about, and everybody puts all this effort into when you unbox it. Why? Because it's your first impression. So your first impression is your artwork, it's your website, it's your logo, all that stuff. And you can get that from our good buddy Mark over at podcastbranding.co. One last point about Mark, of course, not only is he an award-winning graphic artist, he is a podcaster. So you don't have to explain that it's like a radio show thing to Mark. So if you're looking to take your logoing, is that a verb? Logoing?
It is now.
It is now. I like it.
You're looking to take your branding to the next level, then go over and see my buddy Mark at podcastbranding.co. And Jim, that is an awesome mug that you are holding up there as well.
Big thanks to Dan Lefebvre who sent this over. I got to get the lighting just right on it. Based on a True Story podcast out at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. If you're a history buff or you just want to see if movies are actually accurate, and I like that. I enjoy that. I enjoy going out hey, how truthful, that Midway movie that came out, how truthful was that really, right? If you really want to know. They say it's based on a true story, but we never really know. So if you need a new podcast to listen to and it's super interesting and factual, based on a truestorypodcast.com. Thanks, Dan.
And I have to do this because it's Glenn.
Oh, well, hold on. Get back to you guys. You only have me. Dave, I think you only have me.
Yes, I'm sorry. There we go.
There we go.
You're just so dang sexy, man. I was like, we're just going to spotlight Jim the whole episode. But yeah, so I want to make Greg, or Gary, whatever his name is. I want to make Glenn feel at home. So little horse Winnie.
Thank you. Actually, I'm happy to not talk about horses for an hour, to be honest, after the last 2 weeks.
Well, but Glenn, you're doing you're on the road, you're meeting your listeners. I mean, this is I think this is the mecca of podcasting in some respect, where you get to go face to face with the listeners. Have you learned in the last 2 weeks? You've done this before, but just for folks
I don't think anybody's done what we're doing.
Okay.
In the podcasting world, we're staying at their homes. in their farms.
Yeah.
So there's one thing to
Ooh.
do meetups. There's another thing to stay at their farms for 2 nights. We're in our RV. We're not in their house.
Yeah.
So we're in our RV, which is like being home every night when you go into it, which is kind of nice. I would never do this with a hotel trip. We're doing 5 weeks. We're in 2 weeks now. We have 3 more to go. And we're at 1,500 miles right now. So we've done 6 meetups. We've stayed at maybe 5 places, 5 or 6 different farms. And so it is different in that we are truly seeing how they live, where their horses are. I don't know that this has ever been done before in podcasting.
I will say this. I think you've inspired people because when I was on Facebook today, our buddy from Texas who always has this critique is lightning. I'm drawing a blank on his name. He does a sports show. Anyway, he has an RV and is, I think, going on the road. I saw a couple people like, hey, we're going on the road to me. And I was like, I know somebody who did that first. So
it's interesting too, because they're very excited to see you. They, in our case, some of them listen to our show for 10 or 12 years, and the Daily Show daily for 10 or 12 years. Okay. So, it's been interesting to see that how they react to you because you're a celebrity just pulled into their driveway. We don't feel that way because we all have imposter syndrome, right? So Dave and I especially. And we pull in their driveway and they're so excited. And the first reaction is, I can't believe you're at my house.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's kind of neat. And then what we're doing for all the daily shows on this 5 weeks is all the guests are our listeners. So we're not having any other guests other than the interviews I do with them at their houses or at meetups and things along the way. So it's all listener guests. And that's what's making it different too, because listeners like to hear about other listeners because they can relate. Yeah.
The thing that makes this doable is you're sleeping in your own thing.
Yes.
Because if I had to sleep in,
hotels.
I love my listeners, but that could get really awkward real quick.
No, we knew we wouldn't sleep in people's houses. That's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
So it's weird for them. It's weird for us.
Yeah.
It's weird for everybody. But when we're done at night and tired, you're out doing and they always have activities planned for you all day. So they keep you busy. You're going into your own space with your own bathroom and your own kitchen and your own clothes. It's like being at home every night. So,
there you go.
It's fun. It's been a lot of fun. And we have 3 weeks to go. And if my wife doesn't divorce me, we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about that. You're on the road. It's 24/7. You're out of your element. It's fun, right? There's just some moments, but there's also like, how are you working through the relational just because it's different, right?
Well, we've always worked together in the same house for the last 30 years. So, it's not like we haven't been together. So we have worked in the same house for 30 years. So I think that helps. That does help. If it was a new relationship, I think it would be tougher. Then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny, but it's not funny. It was kind of a red flag. One of the worst arguments I've ever had was on my second honeymoon because we just spent a full week together after not really, you spend time together, but when you have 7 hours in a car and there's no separate corners to go to, that can get ugly.
Oh, I couldn't do it. I'm just gonna go straight up. Like, that's nothing I can do.
That's why you asked that.
Yeah, exactly. I just couldn't. Like, I look at that and I think, holy cow, there's no way on the planet that I could ever pull anything like that off. So, yeah, good for you for kind of knowing your boundaries, at least know what to do. You're giving her a little bit of a break this morning. You're hanging out with Dave, and so that's a good. Yeah. I don't know if that's a break for you, Glenn, but
well, actually, my wife has assigned Dave to keep me away all day. So apparently, totally. Dave has his job today is entertaining me.
Yeah. I like it. I like it a lot.
This is a good question.
Yeah, Craig wants to know, how do you manage good internet connectivity when you're on the road, especially when you're going to farms?
Yeah, farms is tough. And so what I did is we sent out a questionnaire to every place we were going to be staying. And I think there's a total of 15 farms during this trip. And one of the parts of the questionnaire is they had to send me a speedtest.net screenshot. So I knew what I was getting into when I got there. And then if they had Verizon phones, I wanted to know how many bars they had. So some of this we've been able to do on our Verizon connection, just using the hotspot. And then others, we've been able to use their internet if they had half decent internet. Yesterday, they had 1 bar and DSL, get this, Jim, it was 0.25 up. Yeah, 0.25 up. So I drove to town. Yeah. You find the cell tower. I parked in a drugstore lot and did the show from my truck.
Right.
And what allows me to do, and by the way, the guest was in the passenger seat of my truck. And as a
Yeah.
diesel, I had it running all 2 hours to keep the air conditioner going.
Right.
But we were able to do that now because of the P4. Because I can run, if we have a laptop that's charged and the P4, I don't need power. So I can do the whole show, even connecting through Skype and everything without power.
Well, you can probably comment on this better than anybody. You use a Roadcaster when you're
At home, yeah.
You use the P4 at home. You can run a Roadcaster on like a USB brick.
Yes.
They make a cable for that.
But it's so big.
Yeah, I'm going to say, what's...
This is my studio now, you know?
So you could run that off an inverter off your truck too, right? I mean,
actually, you can plug this into your computer off the DC, and it's not running off a battery. So it's running off your computer battery.
The laptop
could
run off an inverter.
Except inverters make a tiny little noise. They do have kind of a little fan in them.
They do.
So that's a problem. So I was able to do a 2-hour show without any problem at all in the truck, and you couldn't hear the truck running or anything.
That's great.
So, yeah.
That's great.
So this is and I used to carry a trunk of equipment to do remotes.
Yeah.
And now we show up, I can plug 4 mics, 4 headsets, and I'm good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and it's a good recording too. It is a good recording in here.
And that's the cheaper way, right? The P4, what's the P4?
$200 versus $500-600 for the...
Probably the cheapest way to get it done.
The big road is too big for road. Yeah. This is what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would in a truck, you wouldn't want that big. And
no, I'm already spread out all over the seats.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we do it. That's how we handle internet as best we can. Sometimes we have to drive a bit. Hi, Jason Bryant's in the house.
He's
in just got back from the Olympics.
From Tokyo.
Yeah.
I know, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I was watching all his pictures from over there. So
fun to see that. It's almost surreal. Like you see this stuff on TV and then he shows up in the same set.
I know.
Like, oh crap, he's actually there. That's cool.
Yeah. That's wild. We weren't here last week, of course, because of podcast movement. Yeah. And one of the opening keynotes was Tom Webster. And I don't know if you've gotten to see any of this online yet, or if they've shared any of this, but he had a great point. He said, people said, how do I grow my audience? And he said, you're kind of asking the wrong question, because people are saying that because, maybe they've plateaued or whatever. And he goes, maybe you need to ask, why did my audience stop growing? And I was like, ooh, that's a really good question. And so he said, when you get your head around that question, you can very quickly see that the answer is simple, as people aren't sharing your podcast anymore. Because he went into he's from Edison Research, so he had all the stats, and he was talking about how really still the number one way that people learn about podcasts is people share them. And they go, hey, did you hear this podcast? And go, what podcast? And then, so I know Glenn has his auditors, his Patreons. I hate that word because I always want to say patrons.
I changed it to auditors.
Yeah. It's like the pay to he has auditors, and those are his super fans. So those are the people that are out, carrying the Horse Radio Network.
See, I thought the answer was going to be because Apple broke podcasting. That's why we're not growing.
Yeah, it's very possible. Glenn, have you plateaued? You've been doing this a long time. You watch your numbers. Have you plateaued?
We in the last 2 years, because of it, we've been waiting for podcasting to catch up to the world since we started, Dave and I, 13 years ago. And finally, after the last 4 years, podcasting, I don't have to explain to too many horse people anymore that, what it is. Right. So yes, we have seen an increase. And we were the only horse podcast in the world for the first 10 years. There were none. And now there's a bunch. So that's helped us, actually. The more podcasts that have been out there, people go look and they search and they figure out how to listen because they listen to that one and they come to us. So it's helped us having more podcasts in the world, in our world. So that's helped us a lot. But yeah, we've been growing up. Now, I will tell you, we took a 20% hit when this Apple thing. In the last 2 months, it's been 20% across all the shows. Wow. We have seen a serious hit with this. And I think it's because, 60% of our people tend to have iPhones. And I cannot tell you how many listeners have written us, probably 100 now. I can't get the show. It's not updating, and I'm telling them, my answer is get a new app. And most of them are downloading new apps and Apple's got to lose share on this. It's still not right.
The reason, in theory, if I just upgraded my phone a couple days ago to the latest version, which in theory should fix the whole, because what happened is Apple quit automatically downloading your show if you were a follower, and that hits people's pocketbooks when you're talking sponsorship. And I've heard multiple podcasts this week say exactly what Glenn just said is, hey, you know what? We appreciate everything that Apple has done. it appears that they don't care when their stuff breaks because it takes them a long time to fix it. And my favorite thing is I have people contacting Libsyn, and I'll say, oh yeah, your episode's in your feed. You can see it's on Spotify. It's on Amazon. So your feed is working. And they're like, so this is an Apple problem. And they go, oh, that can't be right. And you're like, no, it's an Apple thing. And so I've heard, I was listening to a show by Castos this morning, and they were like, hey, maybe it's time to give Pocket Cast a try, or, go over to newpodcastapps.com, give one of those a shot, because I probably have at least 3 a day of somebody saying, hey, my podcast isn't showing up. And it used to be you had to subscribe. Well, now you subscribe and it's still not there. Scott says Apple's revenue from podcasting is such a tiny percentage. Yep. Of their overall revenue, they don't really care. So I understand why they don't care.
Tiny's not the right word, by the way.
Yeah. Minuscule.
It's impossibly small. For what they make on every, and I've joked about this, but I really think there's 4 people in that team that's doing this. I just don't, I think it's a side gig. It's somebody who's giving, because they're passionate about podcasting. And so they're giving it, 20 hours a week or whatever, right, on the side. You're right. I just don't feel like they give it that much. It's not that really important to them.
The reason I used Overcast is because there was a time when Apple broke Apple Podcasts so bad that it would not start. And I was like, hey, I'm driving around in my car. I got to listen to that. The chat room is talking about Good Pods. Don't you love that, Glenn, when you go to click on something and it moves?
Yeah,
so close.
Listen, every other player is better than that one.
That's true. Does it work?
Everyone is.
Yes.
Yes.
Good Pods, I like the if I wasn't using Overcast, I would think about that. But for me, again, the issue with Good Pods is I have to leave Overcast to really get the most out of it. And at one point they said they were going to make a way, and I haven't tried this in a while, but you know how you can share things from apps, and I was going to be able to share what I was listening to Good Pods. Now you have to have an account. And when I tried it, that wasn't working exactly great. And so they got that feedback. They're like, hey, thanks for trying it. We'll have to work on that. But I haven't gone back. But I still get emails from Good Pods. It's like, here are what your friends are listening to. Mm-hmm. So as a discovery tool, it's definitely got promise. So that's one. I started playing with one this week called Fountain, and it's on Android or iOS. And what I like about it is if you want to do that whole give Bitcoin to people, they make that easier. I can't say easy because I've already got an app that's connected to my bank, and I've already got a thing that shows me sat. So I kind of go into one app, copy a QR code, paste it into this other one, and then it goes into the app. So it's like, oh, it's easy. It's copy and paste. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's after I've installed 2 other apps. But it's brand new, and as you might imagine, it's got a few bugs. I noticed today that I went to listen to a podcast, and it said, hey, you have another hour or so left of this podcast. And I hit play, and it went back to the beginning, and I went, oh, that's not good. You got to remember where I was at. So, but there are some great, apps out there. I think it's Breaker that lets you leave comments.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I've used that from time to time. Glenn, have you thought about doing your own app?
We do have one.
Do you?
Okay. Yeah, years ago, when horse people are behind technologically by about 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I've been fighting this battle for a long time, and we thought, well, they know how to download apps. So about 5-6 years ago, we had a very simple one designed. It has just our shows on it, simple players, the whole thing. And we've had 35,000 people download it, and I'm still getting people downloading it. But that's how we taught people how to listen, was download this app, and then it's very simple to just listen to shows. And then what happened is they would we want them to graduate out of our app into something more sophisticated, and they do. So in surveys, we found a lot of people started with our app and then went to podcasting apps when they figured it out. So that was a big help to us. I mean, you think about 35,000 people downloading it, and we get probably 10,000 plays a month on it. Mm-hmm. So people are still using it too. That's the other thing. They haven't all abandoned it. So it definitely helped us when for education. Education's been the hardest part of my whole journey here, is educating the listener how to listen what a podcast is.
And I know Apple Podcasts just added a feature where you can say only show me indie podcasts.
How do they clarify that? How do they qualify
That's what we talked about last week.
I heard that.
What's indie?
Am I an indie?
Yes. in theory, because you're not.
But
I'm
are
full
you?
time. I make money.
But that's a good
I'm
question.
professional.
It's a network.
I'm a
Yeah.
network, a professional podcaster. Yet I think of myself as an indie because I don't have corporate funding. It's all my funding. So
Yeah.
maybe that's where the line is.
Glenn, do you consider yourself an indie or not?
Yeah, I do.
You do. Okay.
I spend 100 hours a week running this. I'm an indie.
Well, what's not indie? What's is it corporate? So am I because
That would
I
be the
But I have a corporation.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing,
I
because there's
don't know. It's
the
tricky.
Wonderies and the
am I
you know-
corporate because I
NPR.
podcast for Gallup? Does that
Oh, you're
make-
definitely corporate. You're so corporate. You should be here in a suit and a tie.
yeah.
Can I give a quick shout out to somebody?
Oh, go
Play
ahead.
the Winnie. We do every morning on the morning show, by the way, which is approaching 3,000 episodes. 10 years. We're one of the longest running daily shows in the world. We do a daily Winnie, and it's a shout out. It's a shout out. And play the Winnie. That's for my buddy Ken, who I know has been having some challenges. And Ken, I've been thinking about you every day. I know he's in here, so I just wanted to say, Ken, we've been thinking about you. We love you, man, and hang in there.
Absolutely.
So that's what Daily Winnies are all about. And we give them to our listeners. Daily Winnies are always for our listeners.
Yeah, I think it was Ken that asked about personal apps. For me, I've always thought personal apps were exactly what Glenn said. They're great when your audience, because everybody knows how to download an app. Like if you say, oh, just, number one, you can go to the App Store. That's a good question. Is there less clutter in the App Store than there is in actual Apple Podcasts? That's a good question. But most people know how to download an app. So I know I have an app for the School of Podcasting from Libsyn. I never promote it ever. And I get probably 10 people download that thing a month. And I was like, okay, so you never know. So, and going back to Good Pods, Diane says here, I want Good Pods to have a feature that will separate my comedy podcast from my true crime. That's my favorite feature in Overcast. I have multiple playlists. One's called Comedians, and it's got Mark Maron and Conan in there. One's called Politics. It's got No Agenda and Jen Briney. And then I have one called Podcasting that has like 8 million podcasts in it. And I used to have one called First String that was like all my favorite podcasts, and I could go in there. So that's my favorite feature. And when I saw playlists in this Fountain app, but what they're like, how am I going to be different? They allow you to make clips. And when you log into the app every day, they give you 3 new clips to listen to. So it's this whole like, hey, you might like this thing. And then you can make a playlist of clips. And when I found that, I was like, oh, that's not what I want though. I want a playlist to be a playlist. So what's cool about that, again, kind of like being indie, is I got an email. I reached out to the company and said, hey, like, how do I make a playlist? And he's like, oh, that's not what that's for. But the minute I connected with that developer, he's like, what else would you like to see in the app? And I was like, that's the best question ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, hey, go download Overcast, make it do that. I said, you've got the Bitcoin thing down. I go, now just get the podcasting thing down and you got a winner. So, and when they're indie, they'll think about that. So yeah.
Dave, can I circle back to the question I asked Glenn though? Like when you've plateaued out,
Yeah.
what do you guys do? Like what kind of things, or what's your thought process on like, okay, we've plateaued. How do we get off that plateau?
Well, I think you have to be creative, and that's what we're doing on this 5-week trip, right? Because we know it creates buzz. So what's happened on this trip too is for the meetups and stuff, people tend to invite their friends over too, who aren't listeners, that then they become listeners. So we try and do things always outside the box that are going to bring in new listeners. And a lot of times it's one at a time, right? It's not hundreds at a time or thousands at a time. It's a slow grind that way, but we do a radiothon every year at Christmas. It's 12 hours live, and it's a whole 20 hosts. It's a whole thing. And that creates buzz, and new people will start to listen to that. They listen to that, and then they go try something else. They find one of the other shows. So it's just constant. And also, we have weeks twice a year that are promotion weeks. And all of our shows actively encourage on the episodes the listeners to promote the show. So you make it a thing. They're not going to do it on their own. They just don't think about it. They're busy. They listen to your show and a bunch of other shows. They don't think about it. It's not their fault. They want to help you. You have to tell them how to help you. And you can't do that every week. It gets old. So we make that a special occasion twice a year where there's a week where we ask them to promote us this week. It's promotion week. And then they all go out and do it because it's promotion week. right? It's a special thing.
Mm-hmm.
Create a logo, do that kind of thing. Give them the logo, all right? Make it available. So that's, I don't know, that's one of the things we do.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
We announced this week on Home Gadget Geeks, we're going to do a meetup, but instead of going to them, we're going to host it here in Omaha. And so folks are going to come, folks want to come in. Our tech guys are going to want to come in. That's another way, I think, of kind of growing or getting that buzz going again. It was funny. As soon as we announced it, like people were like, okay, they got super excited about getting together. Now, I think we're going to plan for 2022 at this point. I'm not going to try this fall. There's too much crazy stuff going on. But as we look at the spring in Omaha is beautiful. That's, I think, another way of, bring people in, let them come to you. It's a little more expensive, but you get your kind of most engaged listeners that way for sure.
Yeah.
Nice.
Definitely.
Yeah, Scott says his most loyal listeners are the ones that he acquired one or two at a time. And that's really like, how do you grow your audience?
I listen to his show, so I'm one of those.
Yeah, one or two at a time. Absolutely. Yeah. Diane says she subscribes to about 50 plus podcasts on podcasting. And I did see today, I was out in the Facebook groups, and somebody started a podcast. We'll just say Craig. And he says, hey, I've recorded my first Tell Us Your Story type interview today. So I was like, ooh, I've never heard of that. That's
nobody's ever done that before.
And that was like, so good luck
Yeah,
with
but
that.
you don't want to discourage. Like,
I don't want to discourage Craig.
You don't want to discourage because they might do it better. Craig might do it better than everybody else has,
but
right? Or a different flair. Just don't call it on fire.
Right. Interesting stories on fire.
On fire.
But I have a question, Jim. Here's one that I was listening to Podland with James and Sam, and they were talking about Fireside, the chat thing with Mark Cuban, and we can talk about him after the break. But Sam brought up a question. Do you think, how it's still pretty much the case that most podcasters do about 6 or 7 episodes, they get tired and they quit. And his thing was, but if they had a live audience and somebody showed up, would they make it longer than 7 episodes? And I was like, that's an interesting question. What do you think?
Live brings in a different element to it. And I think I have kind of 2 kinds of lists because I do everything live first. That's just, there's nothing I record that's not live. It's just the way it's, for me, it's the way it's done. So I have a kind of two groups of listeners. I have those that almost only come live, and then your regular listeners. And it's a different, it's a different feel. It's a different level of engagement. I think we have something similar here, Dave. Like the folks that come out every week, I don't know why. Like I still wonder why they come out and listen to us. Glenn, you do every week because it's community. That's why. Because it's a place to belong.
I'm seeing all my friends in there.
Right.
Yeah.
And according to Coach Dave, these are great ideas.
Well,
Dave, of course they are.
Of course they are. We're indies here.
I'm trying not to have the imposter syndrome anymore. I'm just going to own it.
But,
on that point, Jim, you're exactly right. I owned an acting company for 10 years. We did over 400 shows. And that immediate laughter and feedback and clapping and applause, I miss that. And we don't get that. Even the people here, they're commenting and stuff, but it's not like hearing laughter or not laughter if your joke fails, whatever that emotion is, or having them cry right in front of you, whatever that is. I'd miss that. I do miss it.
And Scott has done a little digging here, said Glenn's post on Facebook for the show has a link to the School of Podcasting, which is an episode from 2011 where Dave opens up with, yes, I'm converted to live podcasting. So it is handy because what I love to do on this show is throw out ideas and get feedback. And a lot of times, and everybody that listens to this show knows this, you will hear me start an idea over here. And 3 weeks later, it'll show up on the School of Podcasting after I've let it percolate. But I kind of use this as a litmus test, like, oh, this is an interesting topic and things like that. So,
yeah, but listen, I think your most engaged listeners listen to us live. Like that's just the way it is. And so it's a great, I just think, and it's not, listen, live is not for everybody. So there are some who, it's just, that's not going to be your gig. But if it can be your gig, I think it can be a good one. I've just decided I'm going to record, edit, and publish, and it's all going to be live. That's what I decided to do. Everybody's got to kind of figure out their own model, but it does create great engagement. And just before we thank our awesome subscribers here, Dave, the the point to that is that you got to try some things. Like, I just think, even if you've been doing this a while, even if you've been listening to us for a while, and you're not to get off that, like, I got the same 600 downloads every week. You're gonna have to try something different if you wanna break out, and you're gonna have to take some risks. Glenn, do you ever worry that when you do this, you're gonna lose listeners? Like, I'm gonna try something different. I might lose a few listeners in the process. Do you worry about that?
No, not really, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, we might,
Yeah.
but then there are probably listeners that were going to go away eventually anyway.
Sure,
right?
sure.
They're your less loyal listeners, so they're probably going to go away at some point.
Well, you vetted where you went based on internet speed and the fact that they were a listener. Did you check to see if, like,
I checked to see if they had a vaccine.
that too, but I mean, in terms of, like, can this person bring content? I guess because they're a farmer and they have horses.
We didn't do that at all. I don't know some of these people we showed up at, and that's what makes great interviews. We showed up. The lady was a doctor, and he was something else, and he was an expert drone flyer. So we got out and flew the drone and took drone video. So we didn't know what we were getting into, and I intentionally didn't want to know. I believe if you're good at your job as a host, every person you talk to has a story. It's your job to get them to tell the story in an entertaining way. That's our job. That's not their job. That's not the guest's job. And I don't care if you've never met this person before. If you're good, it's why I always recommend new podcasters, if you're serious about this and you want it to be a profession, take improv classes. Go take improv classes. That we did improvisational acting for 10 years, 450 shows. That's why I'm good at what I do when it comes to interviewing, is improv. Yeah. So yes, I believe it's our job to make the guests sound good. That's your job, not their job.
There we go.
Yeah, I agree.
When it comes to improv, you know who's really good at improv?
Who's that?
My awesome supporters.
Oh, they are. I don't know any of them.
Can I get a little coffee before we get going on that? Because I blew through that last one. Thanks, Dave.
Excellent. And so, of course, you do have a dog. You have a greyhound.
Yeah, we had to give up the greyhound.
Oh,
the greyhound didn't like us.
Hold on. There we go. Yeah, we want to.
But I know him.
Yeah.
He's been on our show.
Have you?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
James from the Dog Podcast Network. So if you have a pooch or a hound or I'm trying to think of another name. Any other names for a dog? Pooch, hound, dog?
Spot.
Yeah.
Dog.
Yes. He's got podcasts that he created specifically for you to listen to while you walk your dog around the block or wherever you're walking to. So, as well as he's got short shows, long shows. It's all dogs all the time. Check it out at dogpodcastnetwork.com. And of course, we always want to thank our $20 supporter. $20 supporters. Some guy named Glenn the Geek.
I must have forgot to cancel that. Thanks for the reminder, Dave.
From the Horse Radio Network. Shane, who I'm wearing his shirt today.
You are representing.
From Spybrary. And Shane got me tipsy. He kept buying me beers at Podcast Movement.
Wait, so he got something. I've never got that done. I'm going to have to work harder next time I'm with you.
It reminded me a lot of the old Tootsie Roll commercial. How many beers does it take to get Dave to be a little buzzed?
What's
the
number?
A two, a three. It's three beers will give Dave a buzz. Ed Sullivan over at SonicCupcake.com.
Talk about good logos. I like that logo.
There you go. Yeah. And Felix, who I saw walk by at Podcast Movement, but I never got to catch up with. Yeah, over at the Latinx Podcast Awards. So if you are looking for Latinx podcasts, he's got a ton of them over at LatinPodcastAwards.com. If you are looking, again, if you don't like Ed and you don't like me, go over to KJSTmedia.com. This is an LGBTQ plus founded company that focuses on helping all levels of podcasters to grow their podcast, and check them out again, kjstmedia.com. The Indie Drop-In Network, if you've got a true crime show, a comedy show, or a scary story, they've got an audience. All you got to do is connect with Greg over there at Indie, speaking of indie podcast, indiedropin.com, and he will put your episode in front of his audience. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. Max has interesting videos. He's now taking videos from the plane, which are kind of interesting. Greg over at debtshepherd.com. And Kim, who was at our meetup last night.
Good to see you.
Yeah, Toastmasters101.net. So if you're looking to develop your voice, reduce your editing time, and improve your content, Toastmasters101.net. And the one I somehow messed up my PowerPoint today. Pay note is the person that got me tipsy at Podcast Movement. Shane, not only does he have Spryberry, yeah, Spry. That's a whole other podcast. Spyberry. And he does Tourpreneur. And I've talked about Shane in the past because, as you might imagine, when the tour industry went, a lot of podcasts went away. And Shane just went to his audience and said, what do you guys want to talk about? So he's a new, there's that word again, Patreon. I need to come up with a new.
We used auditor because when you go to clinics, horse clinics, the people watching are auditors. That's why we use auditor, because it's a common name in the horse world. What's a common name in the podcasting world?
That's a good one. Nerd.
Yeah. I could come up with negative ones.
We call them awesome supporters.
Yeah, I like that.
You can become one at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Or if you'd like to sponsor a mug or buy Dave's book or just donate one time, it's all over there at askthepodcastcoach.com/stores. So thanks to everyone for participating. We do appreciate that. And if you're listening on Clubhouse, you can raise your hand and we will bring you up on stage. If you're watching us live, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And, you can ask your question and talk to Glenn and me and Jim live. We do have a question here. Let's talk about who wasn't at PM. Well, yeah, Descript. Spotify had a spot, but no booth.
I heard Spotify I only had 2 people that would come. So
yeah,
but they're coming from like Europe somewhere, so that's a little tougher anyway.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to say because there were companies I think that probably we had 3 people at Libsyn that were planning on going. They have young kids under the age of being vaccinated, and at the last minute they're like, "Hey, we're not coming. We don't feel comfortable doing that." So but they were nowhere to be found, and it's. To me, I get that they weren't there. I mean, we could pick on all sorts of media hosts and things like that. It's a
weird time. It's just a weird time.
We can't tell anything by this year.
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, it was clearly defined last year. This year, it's just super murky. And so it's
getting murkier. So this is what the days go on.
Yeah. It's definitely getting
We had a couple of people question our trip this year. Why, because we're going to be around people. And, we thought of, and we're testing ourselves every week. And there's home kits that are pretty accurate now. And matter of fact, I had some shipped to Dave's house. So we're doing that every week. And if we test positive, then we're going home. I mean, that's it. We're just stopping.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there were home kits. You could
now you have to stick that thing up your nose. So
it's not that's not happening.
I was crying yesterday.
It took 2 people. They had to hold my head with one and then the other one, and I was still reeling back from it. So home kit, no. That's
see, I'm flashing back to the old game shows. It's like, hey Jim, thanks for playing on the pyramid. As a parting gift, we have the lovely COVID-19 home edition. It's like
that's awful. It's just like I can't ever become diabetic because I can't give myself shots.
No,
that's not ever going to happen.
Yeah. I'll just
so I need to be. I need to stay healthy, so I don't have to do that. Yeah. So home kits are available. So Glenn, but you had to think. You thought through that. You kind of had a plan. Like, okay, here's our plan.
We know it's a risk, but then I'm also at the point where I'm thinking, I don't want to get political. This has nothing to do with politics, but I do believe that we're going to be in this for years. Viruses just don't magically disappear.
Right.
So, we're in some form, we're going to have to deal with it.
And the other thing to think about, you are around people who are not around people. They're on a farm in the middle of nowhere.
A lot of them are not around people.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you've traveled so far, how many miles?
About 1,400, I think, miles so far.
Well,
we almost got killed in Michigan too. That's a whole nother story.
Yay! Can't wait to hit the road.
Wait a minute. Hold on. You can't throw that out and then not say it. So give us the short version.
Well, they had the wickedest storms they've had. We're at a campground, a horsey campground, where all our listeners have left, and we're going to have a quiet day at this horsey campground in the middle of a state forest. And I leave to go into town for a couple minutes to go to the store, and these wicked storms hit. And Jennifer calls me and says, the camper is rocking. It is so windy here, and I'm afraid one of these trees is going to fall on the camper. So I give you the short story. I go to get home. 5 of the roads are blocked by trees down. Trees on cars.
Wow.
Power lines everywhere. I finally get home only because I had a big truck and I drove over one of the trees, one of the ends of one of the trees. The cars weren't getting through, but I thought, I got big tires. I can do this. So I got through and got back, and it was wicked all night like that.
Wow.
Branches were down within 10 feet of the camper that would have put a hole in the roof. And the whole thing was shaken. And then all the roads were closed. Power was out everywhere. It was a hairy one.
Yeah. Do you bring a generator on your
Yeah, we
trailer?
have a generator that we bring along, and I could have used it. We had power. Everything around us didn't. That little campground had power. All the neighbors were mad. They kept coming down saying, do you have power? I said, yeah. So, but we had the generator. We could have.
Well, glad you were safe.
And again, Glenn lives through hurricanes.
You're right. I live in Florida, so this is just bringing it with us.
Yeah. But I asked that because somebody asked in a Facebook group, how far are you willing to travel to meet other fellow podcasters for a networking group meetup, or where you talk shop and share tips and rub elbows? What's interesting is when I lived in Cleveland, which is about an hour from Akron, people from Akron, mainly Kim, would drive to Cleveland to meet up. When I moved to Akron, people from Cleveland will not drive to Akron. It's the same time, but it's like, so Jim, how far would you go to do like a hangout?
Yeah, well, I've driven,
yeah,
several times, 10 hours to Indianapolis to do this.
Wow.
And I drove 2 days to Boston last year to see Ed. Right now, that wasn't really a meetup, from that, but it was. I was going, we did Ask the Podcast Coach live from the studios there at Two Guys Cigars. And so I've done a lot to get to do these kinds of things. And it's not just me. When we do these meetups, we have folks that come from all over. It's just, we have them fly in from California. We've had them come out from Colorado. So if the relationship is there and it's something they really want to do, the distance is irrelevant. Like, they will make it happen.
So I'm going to change that question a little. And maybe this is the more important question, is how far will your listeners go to meet you?
Yeah. Well,
so we had people driving 2 or 3 hours to get to our meetups, and I think that's crazy, but they did. So that's probably the more important question, right?
Yeah, two guys, they record after us. They for the Cigar Authority. They have folks coming up from New York, which is all the way through Connecticut to Boston. That's
not a fun drive at all.
No, New York City to Boston is not through Connecticut. It's beautiful, but it's anyways. So they make that trip, and so but you have to. That's like when you've really got something right. I think when folks are willing to make that kind of sacrifice.
Yeah.
Well, we have an easy question here. Somebody said, "How do you fix the AC noise in the background of your podcast?" And my answer was, you can try things like the noise removal in Audacity. There's what's the RX8? I forget the name. Isotope RX7 and 8 has noise removal. Audition has a noise removal. Glenn has the best answer ever, which is, what do you do, Glenn?
I turn it off.
Yeah, you turn it off.
So in the RV, the air conditioner is right above where we record, and it's very loud. Yeah. So I turn it off, and then if we're doing a long show, we take a break in the middle for 10 minutes. I turn it back on so I don't die. Get the air conditioner back on, and then we start again. So that's how we do it. But the other, rain. If it's raining hard with the RV, we can't do a show because it's too loud in there. So that's one of the things we've discovered from the road the hard way is, okay, we're going to swelter in here doing the show because we have to turn it off.
And then here's are you ready to go? So, what does, in 3 words, which right there, we're podcasters. Can we have, I think we need at least 30, but we're going to try to do this in 3. What does a successful podcast look like to you in 3 words? Everyone together.
Well, I think I could say it in 4. Though I can't do 3. The one you like, when you like, if you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, but you don't like what you're doing, Like Glenn, I mean, imagine if you woke up every day to do your morning radio show and you just hated it, like, and not like sick to your stomach kind of hated it. It doesn't matter how many people listen, you're miserable, right? And it's become a job from that perspective. So success for me is when you're doing it and you're enjoying it. Now I happen to get paid to do it as well at work, and I enjoy it, which is double bonus, right? To be able to do that
helps.
But yeah, I think the key is you got to do it. The rewards have to be lined up correctly so that you enjoy what you're doing. So again, I didn't say that in 3 words, but there you go.
You also see a lot of questions on the Facebook pages about co-hosts. I cannot express how important it is to have a good co-host. You guys know that. You have symmetry. I mean, my morning show co-host, we're almost at 3,000 episodes. So that's 11 years. And it's every day, an hour and a half a day. I probably would not be doing this show, and she has said this for sure, if it wasn't for her, because I enjoy talking to her every morning. And then, then in effect, I'm talking to the listeners and I'm having fun, but I'm having fun with her. If I had to switch co-hosts now, I don't know. I think that's what's making it work for me. And I think if you're going to have a show that runs a long time, when you have a co-host, you have to really, really, really like that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know when Jim has, he's working with young, what is that called? You have some sort of
our high school internship program.
Yeah, when he does that, and there's I don't know, a month or so that he is out, and I will pull in different people, and not that they're bad, but you are used to a certain rhythm, and just kind of like Jim's really good at watching me, and if he can tell if I'm like doing something behind the scenes, and he will just jump in and start talking. I'm like, excellent, because I can't get PowerPoint to come up or something like that. So, and a new person isn't going to know that. They're just trying to wait for me to shut up so they can talk. So, yeah, when you find a good co-host, it's like butter.
Oh, it's listen, it's incredible. I mean, I've had them and lost them in the process too, and I'm in a situation now where that's the case. Our flagship podcast, and she's just not available anymore. And so I've been kind of looking for others, but you can't find someone else and then try to make them the person before, right?
That's what marriage is for.
That's what divorce is for. What are you talking about?
Well, but you gotta, because you found them, Dave, you and I worked into this thing, right? I mean, we just kind of started figuring some things out. If we didn't like each other or we were constantly arguing, it just wouldn't have worked, right? But we found this sweet spot. If I decided I needed to do something different and you had to get a different co-host, the show should get a fundamentally different feel, because you wouldn't want to try to make that person me,
Right.
I think that's the biggest mistake folks make with co-hosts. So with the chemistry working right, it just flows. Dave, you and I just flow. We don't
and
really
it's
have
easy.
to,
When you get fill-in co-hosts, you have to work harder. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's easy for you two because you got it. And because it's both of you, it makes it easy for both of you.
Yeah. Right.
But then when you get a fill-in, you're on edge the whole time.
And it's not bad. It's not bad.
It's fun sometimes.
You just know. Yeah. And I think, you have to know as a host too, you're going to have to work. I think you just said this, Glenn. You're going to have to work a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. Because there's not going to be the automatic kind of switch over. It's not going to just switch. You're going to have your act together a little bit more than maybe you normally do. That's more important for you, Dave, than it is for me, because I've only run this show once, I think, by myself. I think I've done this.
You did, you did it because I remember I had to upload the intro music and stuff to Dropbox. So
that's right. Yeah, and it was okay.
And I think after that you went, we're not doing that.
Yeah, let's not do that anymore.
Yeah, so Dave was out a couple of weeks ago. I heard it immediately, and I emailed Jim and said, I'll do the show with you today. He's like, no, I'm good.
That's it.
Now I know why.
Yeah.
If I had to pick my 3 words, it'd be real engaged audience.
There you go.
Because it's the teacher in me. All I ever wanted as a teacher was a willing student. So if I had 2,000 super engaged people versus 10,000, I kind of like the show. I'd rather have 2,000 people that are like, what is that thing coming out? I mean, Glenn was talking last night. We had a meetup, and we'll get Glenn's review of Luigi's Pizza to see if it's just as good as we say it is. But he was saying that he puts the show out. I think you said at 2.
Yeah,
Well,
2:00.
2:00, and like if it's not out by 2, like by 3:00, he's getting emails like, "Hey, where is it?"
Because I've messed up people's days. I've screwed up their listening habit. Yeah.
So the thumbs up, thumbs down.
Luigi's Pizza is excellent.
Yeah.
And I'm gluten free, but I cheat occasionally. So last night was my cheat night because I've been waiting for this. And it's thick. The tomato sauce has some tang to it. And Luigi's Pizza is known for cheese. And let me tell you, they must go through a ton of cheese a day in the place. It's like, it's excellent.
Ken says, I started Black Man with a Gun to become rich and had to adjust my expectations.
And that's why we're independent, because we don't become rich.
That's the definition.
We just found it.
Yeah. Stefan wants to know, what microphone is Glenn using? It's the one, the only. You can't live without it. The Samson Q2U.
Yeah, and I don't even know if we're set up right. We did this quick this morning.
Yeah, go to supportthishow.com/ I think Q2U.
I've been trying to figure out how to dial that thing in because I don't think you guys are hearing what I'm hearing from that side. And it's been, I wish I had a few more minutes in pre-show to help. I don't know the answer. Glenn, sometimes when you're coming in from the side, it sounds good. I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think we're also picking you up on Dave's mic.
Yeah, that could be a little bit too, because we're kind of facing each other.
Yeah, I look down
like right there, it sounds really good.
Okay, I'll do this.
Yeah, so if we were to really think about this, I would have probably moved my mic like way over here.
Okay, let's be honest, Dave. You got 4 square feet we're working with here. It's very intimate in Dave's studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's used to one person.
Yeah.
And but I remember once when I had and this is hard to believe, I was in a studio, he said in quotation marks, with my ex-wife. It was a little office above a deli, and she was in one corner and I was in the other, microphones pointing directly opposite, and you still had bleed. And that's when I went, we're going to add a noise gate, so it'll kind of squash me when I'm not talking, vice versa. And in the end, my target audience is not sitting there going, wait, squishing their headphones into their head going, I think I hear bleed.
Bleed, I don't worry about his bleed as much as just getting the clarity of it, to where it needs to be. This is the challenge of 2 microphones in a single room. Like it just takes practice, and it's been fine. Most people wouldn't notice.
You are kind of a sound nerd, though.
I am a little bit.
Yeah, you definitely are.
I do. Yeah, it drives me crazy when at work when people come in and they don't, things aren't exactly right, and when we spend 5 minutes me trying to help them get their sound right, I'm like, oh wait a minute, this was just going to be a 2-minute phone call. So you're right, Glenn. You're right.
90% I always get mad at you guys who have this perfect sound with your guests, because 90% of our listeners are on a cell phone at the farm.
Right.
Yeah. Or our guests are 90% on the phone. So it's the reason we still have to use Skype, but we can't use any of the other fancy programs, is because we have to call them on the phone.
But I think that's a little endearing. Like I don't, if it's not all the time, Glenn, I think that's okay. Like people forgive that. It's a guest. It's information. They're not the host. If you were coming in from a phone all the time.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And they know, people know that they get horrible internet at the farm. They know that's not going to be great. And if we can hear a horse whinny in the background, we're winning. That's a beautiful interview for us.
That's right. We're used to having the dogs bark and the kids. It's like all of a sudden you hear a horse whinny. So, but we had a good time last night. We had probably, 6 or 7 people. They sat us, unfortunately, right in front of the kitchen. So it was a little on the air conditioning was having a battle with that, but
I was right at home. It's just like Florida. It's hot, humid. It's perfect.
And as Glenn mentioned, we had some fun weather. I should mention we're getting ready. We're around in third here. If you're on Clubhouse and you got a question, raise your hand. If you're watching live, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join and jump on in. We are going to be doing some post show here in about 5 minutes. We'll do another half hour, but just want to let you know that if you've been sitting there going, should I ask a question? Should I ask? Yes, you should ask a question. Glenn, what's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you while recording?
Oh my.
I know. That's a lot of years to sift through.
Yeah. Boy, that one. I wish I had time to think about that one.
Mine is I was interviewing David Hooper, and in my old apartment, I had 2 bathrooms. It was like 1.5 bathrooms directly opposite from each other. And my office door was right in between the 2. So you could walk out and have your pick of which bathroom you want to go to. And all of a sudden I hear this, and the one toilet has just gone completely demon possessed. And it's spewing. I don't know what was going on, air in the pipes or whatever. And what was funny is I was interviewing David Hooper. So I asked him something like, well, what goes into running a music marketing event? And he's like, well, yeah, I'll tell you, Dave. And off he went. And I'm like, I'm running over and I'm like closing the door. And I got back and he was still answering the question. And so it was funny because I was like, oh, that's great, or whatever I said when it was done. But that was one that was like, and I told him afterwards, and I'm like, did you hear that? And he goes, yeah, I wondered what was going on, because all of a sudden there's this weird, just like, it's one of those noises that you're not expecting. So that was probably one that was just different, shall we say. So
I don't know. I think I have more stories from my acting days. There are some wild stories from the acting days. Do you have one, Jim? Do you have any?
No, I was trying to think through funny. No, the ones that drive me nuts is when I've done a whole interview with someone and I've been on my camera mic because I can't hear myself. You hear,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So you're recording to StreamYard, and that's the way I do it. That's the drawback to doing web-based recording, right? And you get done and you go back to go do the editing maybe a day or two later or whatever, and you hear yourself and you're like, did the guest not like I get so mad, and I get really mad when I'm doing it with another podcaster, and it's probably happened maybe 4 or 5 times. So enough, right? And I like, one was with somebody at work who does this all the time. I'm like, could you not hear my voice was awful?
Yeah.
Like, did that not make any sense to you?
That would drive Jim nuts.
Oh,
Yeah.
I lose my mind.
It's funny because I usually ask a guest, hey, can you tap on your mic? And when they do this and I hear it, I know it's the right one, but they don't ask us. We need to ask them, I guess, in a way, like, hey, can you hear this when I do this?
You're like, how do I sound? Is this, am I coming through? Sometimes I go, am I coming through? And they'll go, yeah, okay. But I don't remember to do that every time. You kind of trust you think, especially when they're experienced. This was the most recent time I've probably done 3 or 4 years worth of shows with her. I've probably done, at least 100 shows. And I was like, could you not tell my voice was a little different than it normally is? She's like, I know, but I was so nervous. She was interviewing it was a big deal to her. And so she was so nervous about that. She just wasn't even listening. So
I had one the other night. We hooked up we were doing this at our trip sponsor's house, and we did the interview 4 mics. We tested them all. I always have everybody test them 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. When I get to the last person we're interviewing, they had moved the mics around, and they must have flipped the switch off on the mic, and I didn't notice it. So, because I didn't have my headphones on, we were just sitting outside doing this, and to get to the recording, I can't hear her at all. So we have to reschedule her, cut it all out, edit it all out.
It happens. What's you said you had funny stories from when you were
one of the ones we did Medieval Feasts. So we did kind of a Benny Hill version of Medieval Feasts, and I had the same acting company for 10 years. Nobody ever left. It was the same kind of thing. We knew each other. We did a show. We did a lot of private shows, and there was a woman's weekend away, and this is where I learned what women are like when they're away from their husbands. So it was a retreat kind of thing. There were 400 women in the audience, and we're doing this show, and I'm the king, and I have this night guy who's really good looking. And every time we'd walk in the audience, they would chant, "Take it off." They would throw us room keys. It was the most bizarre. We finally had to go to the stage. We never went into the audience again because it got dangerous. And that's where I learned a lot about women from that show. My wife was there too. So she's like going, has her mouth open. It was bizarre. We never did a women's show again because it was dangerous.
Ladies' night, no more ladies' night.
No more ladies' night.
When I played in a country band, I went on after a male review.
Oh.
So there's all these oily, sweaty guys on stage, and they're like, "Hey, have a good show." And I'm like, "That's okay. I'm not going to shake your hand."
And one thing doesn't look like the other.
Yeah. But I always did a thing where I took the cue from AC/DC, and I would jump into to the audience and go around and come back up on stage. And I jumped off the audience, and they were like, "It's a man!" And I was like, "Help me, mommy!" It was different. So, what's your next stop there as we start to wrap up? And in the post show, we're going to be talking about improv. We're going to talk a little Zoom PodTrack P4, a little pod page. So Jim. Jim's here. Let's
now I'm Jim.
Go to Glenn.
Glenn, what's your next stop?
We are heading to Western Pennsylvania for a meetup, and going to see another one of our sponsors for this trip.
Nice.
So we're going to visit his factory and warehouse and do some video there and stuff. And then we're going to be in Pennsylvania for the week. And then we're heading Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina. And finally, after 3 more weeks, going to hit Florida.
Awesome. Jim, what's coming up on the AverageGuy.tv?
Glenn, it'll be good to be home for sure. I know.
Yes,
when you get
absolutely.
there, you'll be like, I'm not going to do that again for a while. We hit a small little milestone. Home Gadget Geeks 500 showed up this week.
Good job.
So it was nice. We kind of just did a regular show, to be honest. I didn't pull out fanfare. I did do a top 10 things I learned over the last 500 episodes of podcasting. So that's kind of a fun thing for
Nice.
podcasters. If you don't typically listen to the show, just kind of fast forward to the end if you want to hear those things. I'll post a little bit later today out at the AverageGuy.tv.
There we go. On the School of Podcasting, we're going to talk a little with Greg from Debt Shepherd about being an LLC and other things that I haven't determined yet. I will figure that out when I'm riding bikes with Glenn. But stick around for some post-show coming right up.